Let me introduce our panelists. Starting from the far side, we have John Serra from the University of Pittsburgh at Titusville. He's an assistant professor in the chemistry department. Raquel Fitch from Baruch College, who is an associate professor at their business school. Sahat Yalkaba? Did I get that right? Okay. Who is a student at the City College of New York. Let's see, Dominic Mentor, Columbia University. He is an associate professor in the Communication, Computing, Technology, and Education department. And then we have Jeff Klock, who is an assistant professor at BMCC in the English department. So the format that we're going to use today is everyone is going to have about 5 to 7 minutes to speak, and then we'll give them another 5 minutes to respond to each other, ask questions, give a rebuttal. After that, we'll open up questions to the audience. So we'll begin with John Serra.
Just a little bit of my background. I'm a chemistry teacher at a small branch campus of the University of Pittsburgh at Titusville. We have about 300 total students, okay? So we're talking about very, very small classrooms here and very, very limited budget. Don't let the University of Pittsburgh moniker fool you on that, okay? We don't have a lot of money for anything. Also, I'm in the chemistry program, which means that if I don't get my students engaged, laboratory activities can be, let's just say, less than ideal. How's that? I'm always trying to find ways to get my students to be prepared and interactive and engaged in the classroom. So what we found out is my students really, really love these little guys right here. And many of us, yours truly included, have said cell phones off at some point or another, especially during exams and that sort of thing. What I've found, though, maybe you guys have found this too. If you tell them to turn the cell phones off, they do this. Ever see that? Yeah, I love that. So I tell them I want them on the desk at all times, so I can see what they're doing with them. If I want them to do something, then they have them out. Otherwise, they're on the desk right there, off. If it vibrates, they're gone, if I need it off. Because I don't use cell phones and multimedia all the time in the classroom just to emphasize sticky points. Mainly, what I like to use cell phones or other multimedia devices, anything with Wi-Fi or with 3G or any type of internet-based connection, I like my students to use those kind of like the clicker systems. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the clicker system. We can't afford that. We just do not have the money for a clicker system. We couldn't even put it in one classroom. I've tried already. So what I was trying to do was come up with a way that I could use something like a polling system so that I could get instant feedback. So what I decided to do was this. We do have Blackboard implementation at our institution, and then I was using something called SurveyMonkey. I don't know if you guys have ever used SurveyMonkey before. This is a really nice way to get some interactive feedback from your students early on, and it gives them the opportunity to use these little guys, which keeps them from doing this in my class, which I'm not immune to that happening to me. So we've implemented some things with that. Now here's the way I like to use mine. When I initially start a new topic, whether it's the beginning of a chapter, maybe it's a section of a chapter, or maybe it's somewhere in between where I know students have sticky points, I will have what I call pre-quizzes. And they know coming in that they're going to have to use their little handheld devices, and they're going to have to take these little clickers, my little clicker tests, where it's ABC multiple choice, and they're going to see the results. Now, not the students' individual results, but the class poll results, and then the correct answer displayed on an overhead. They're going to see that so that they can get an idea of, oh my God, I'm not the only one that doesn't know how to do this particular concept. So maybe they'll be less timid to ask me a question. You know what I mean? If they see the whole class is having a problem with something they're having problems with, yeah, they might be a little more inclined to say, wait a minute, or dare I say, come see me during office hours, that sort of thing. Also, right before a test, I will do similar things, but I usually use Blackboard for that. I will give what I call post-tests in lecture. I like Blackboard for that because it can record grades. The initial pre-test is just for them to get the oh my God factor, but after that I try to use it for assessment purposes. So I use both of those. The other thing I've been doing is my classroom's a little different than a lot of people. I have two phases to mine. I have the lecture room and I have the laboratory. The laboratory setting, if it's not properly supervised, properly maintained, and ready to go, it can be what I call organized chaos at times to time, and I have seen chemistry and biology labs like that. I cannot abide that. So what I try to do is I try to get my students engaged thinking about the experiments before they even come to the lab. If I see my students reading a lab book like it's a cake recipe, they're gone. And my students know this. They get one strike and they're out. I'm not messing around when it comes to using chemicals in a laboratory. We're using flammable chemicals. We're using things like that. So I'm a bit strict whenever it comes to that sort of thing. So what we've designed, what I've had my students doing, is creating wikis in the lab settings. So they will do some things outside of class, and then they can access them during lab whenever they have questions about that. That requires an awful lot of work on my part for both maintenance. I don't know if you guys have used many wikis or not, Wikipedia being the one we all know about. But as long as they're moderated fairly well, they can be a nice little tool for students to use inside of the classroom. So basically what I have, and I also create some multimedia video solutions that I've done, and I'm working with a member of our English faculty. What we're doing is scanning in exams, grading them, and then recording what we're doing while we're grading it, and then giving the students back a video file that they can hear how we're grading them on that sort of stuff. Now, that takes a lot of time, but remember, I'm talking about small classes. I think one of my classes I have 12 students, the other one I have 25. So I can do things like this because we have such a small class size. These are just some of the summaries that I've found by using Blackboard as an alternative for clickers. And I'm not going to go through all of these things. I'm just going to pick out some key points. One thing I have found, I don't know if any of you guys have used a course management system like Blackboard before, but I've found that my students don't really care for it. They find it as yet another thing that they're not going to use. My students kind of view that kind of like the textbook, that $300 textbook that sits in the corner there collecting dust. But they do love using Facebook. I'm not immune to that. I love Facebook too. I was on it like 7 times already today. So I'm trying to incorporate Facebook now into my course and phasing out the Blackboard portion. What I'm trying to do is engage my students so that they want to be active in my course. And some of the other techniques that I've developed using SurveyMonkey and Facebook itself is really nice. I recommend anyone to take a look at the idea of making a Facebook education page. I learned about that at a conference I went to. And anyone who's interested in using computers in education, I highly recommend the ASCU conference. It's the Association of Small Computer Users in Education. I've gotten so much great stuff out of that, and I'd be happy to share my information with anyone after the period's over. SurveyMonkey is what I've found works really well because it interfaces with Facebook for me, and it allows me to do those survey questions. Another reason I like survey questions is in a science curriculum, very few textbooks have multiple choice questions in them for a science textbook. And all of my students are either pre-med, pre-dent, or pre-pharm, and they take these placement exams that are all multiple choice, so they need exposure to them. So my tests are very multiple choice oriented, so I like to get them some exposure. Now this is just some of the things that I've done with a wiki in a science lab. Basically what I've done is use it for safety material. But it is very labor intensive. It does require a lot of upfront work by the instructor, a lot of maintenance to make sure that it indeed does provide useful and accurate information. So those kind of things, they're very useful. I've gotten really good feedback from that, but they are extremely labor intensive. To wrap up things a little bit here, what I've done so far, I'm not allowed to share numbers because I'm still waiting for IRB approval to share some numbers, even on a very broad sense. But basically, last year in my freshman chemistry class, I used all of the wiki, I used the SurveyMonkey, I used the polling. And then this semester, this year, now granted I understand the sociological experiments, you have so many variables, you got to be a little careful doing this. But this year I'm not using that. And I'm trying to see what the difference is going to be there. So that's where I am right now. And hopefully if anyone goes to the ASCU conference this June, you'll hear some results from that. And I thank you all for listening to me ramble for 5 to 7 minutes there.
Okay, thanks for the invitation to participate in this panel and have the opportunity to share with you some of the thoughts that I have about this topic. Whether mobile devices in the classroom are good or bad, the answer is it depends. You know, this is typical MBA answer, business school professor. But I'm going to try to articulate with you what are the factors that make it either work well or be a total distraction. I can speak to this topic because obviously I am not only an instructor who has experimented with the use of mobile devices in the classroom, but that is also part of my research agenda. So one of the topics that I investigate is multitasking, not only in the workplace, but also in meetings. So I'm going to share with you my research findings, as well as my more informal anecdotal observations after designing lectures. So going back to the factors to which it depends, one of them is the type of device that we are talking about, and this was well articulated by John before. If we are talking about a cell phone, that's probably not a good idea, because the tendency is to use that device to text under the table, right? Texting under the table. We don't want that, because people are usually texting with others outside of class about non-related class matters. So it is a distraction. We don't want it. We don't want it to ring. We cannot curtail the persons with whom we can interact and those with whom we cannot during the lectures. So that's very cumbersome. So cell phones are out. Now tablets are a little bit better, because they're more closer to notebooks, and they're very amenable to following, let's say, PowerPoints or PDFs and taking notes and annotating. So they're a step better than cell phones, because the uses that are consistent with the lecture are very much there, and the transition from one use to another is not so easy. And then at the other extreme of this continuum of devices, we have the laptop. The laptop is perhaps the best one, the one that has the greatest potential as a device to be very effective, but it also has the biggest risk to be the most distracting tool. And our research has shown that students who bring laptops to the lecture tend to engage in distracting activities. 76% of their activities is distracting. They have nothing to do with the content of the lecture. And we got this because the students agreed to being monitored, so we install a monitoring program in their devices. This was in a small college in Boston, and the school provided them with laptops, and as a part of this deal, they agreed to have a monitoring program and consented to be monitored during class in a specific class that lasted 1 year. We analyzed that data, and it showed that students were doing off-task activities, activities that were not at all related with the content of the class. They were searching the web to find spring break destinations. They were on Facebook. So the type of device matters. The second aspect there is the user. Who is using the device? It has to be a person with discipline. It has to be a person who, even if it's using a laptop, can restrain himself or herself from checking email. Cannot be an obsessive compulsive checker of email. And the third factor that matters is the situational condition. What's going on around them? What's happening in the lecture? Is it a slow, boring lecture that people feel the need to fill their time with other activities? Is it a lecture that does not require people to pay close attention? What is the type of subject that we're dealing with? Is the subject suitable for active experimentation with a computer device, or is the subject totally conceptual, remote, abstract, that does not have any visual appeal or need for experimentation? So briefly, what are the three main pieces of advice that I give you if you are planning as instructors to bring devices into the classroom, or as students to use those devices? So the first one is to be very clear about the etiquette rules of what is allowed and what is not allowed in terms of devices and uses. The second one is, if at all possible, you might consider internet access restrictions in some rooms when you want to diminish people's ability to go online and do unrelated things. But the caveat here is that sometimes you may want them to go online and find things that are relevant for the class, do some sort of active research in the middle of a class. So the ideal there is dynamically set and take off these restrictions. And the best advice that I can give you is that if you allow the use of laptops in the classroom, there has to be a specific purpose for it. It has to be integrated into the lecture. And the way I do it is that in my lectures I have computer-based exercises, times in which the students are supposed to be using the computer and are supposed to communicate the results that they get, and times in which they're supposed to be paying attention to the lecture or whatever is shown in the projector. So if you're able to parcel out these times, then you will make the best uses of those devices.
Hi, I'm actually a student at City College, and I'm gonna say that mobile devices are great, and definitely we should use them in class. But it's also a personal responsibility. A lot of times we ask ourselves, what is it that causes distraction? Is it the device itself, use of technology? What is that? Or is it the professor, or is it the lecture? Maybe the class is boring, or maybe professor is doesn't get the point across to the students. And it's easy to blame it on technology, to say that the person is texting on the phone or going on Facebook. But also, it's looking at it one way. You cannot just say that it's a student's fault and we should just ban the use of technology in class. With mobile devices, we can, especially with tablets, you can have books on it, and it's very convenient, especially from my point of view. I have 300 books on this device, and I can access it in class at any time. And books that are thousands of pages, and I don't have to carry it with me in school. Another thing is most people, like 75, maybe 3 out of 4 people, they prefer to have online searching, so they can search, digital book searching. Instead of having, if you have a regular book, paperback, to find a page, you have to actually go through each single page. If you have a PDF file, you can simply type in and search for it, and you will find what you're looking for right away, instantly. And that's a great advantage of having a tablet in class and using digital books. Another great point of devices is when you're trying to look for something online and you don't understand the term in class, or you don't understand the topic, you can simply look and you can learn it on your own. I do agree that tablets are way more effective than cell phones in class, because the cell phones are mainly used for texting most of the time, and they tend to go off sometimes. Not everybody puts it on a vibrate, and that causes distraction for other people, and that's a problem. But if it's a personal distraction, if somebody's checking his email or checking the Facebook, I think that's a personal responsibility that we should not, as professors, get into it, because that's not really, that's personal responsibility for who is taking the class. The student paid the money to take the course, and that's his responsibility to get out something from the class. And yes, I also do agree that the use of technology in class is a double-edged sword. You can enhance the learning, or it can distract it from learning. And I would also like to mention that one of the professors at Iowa University, what he did is every time the phone goes off in class, he punishes the person by letting that person talk for 10 minutes about the next topic on the next lecture. It's a productive learning. That way you can actually put it on vibrate next time, and in a way you also you'll be as a teacher for the next lecture. So that forces you to learn. That forces you to actually read the book. That's a good way to reinforce the idea. Also, use of cell phones, especially an iPhone. It really helped me a lot to record lectures when I was taking psychology, and go home and listen to it again. And that way it was great for me to study for the exams. And I would just like to conclude that mobile devices is a personal responsibility. We should not try to police everybody and control what they're using, how they're using it. As long as they're not distracting others, it's their responsibility to learn. And if they're not learning, then it's their choice, and it's up to them. That's my point.
Can I ask something real quick? I'm really glad to hear that from a student standpoint, because you had some really poignant comments in there. First of all, that an education is a two-way street. It's both, it's the instructor and the student's responsibility to do education. And that is really, really great to hear from a student standpoint. Second, your point on using tablets, I think, is extraordinarily profound, because I've seen many of the textbook companies now offering rental textbooks that you can download to your Kindle, your iPad, for substantially reduced rates and things like that. And myself, I know as an instructor, I like the electronic copies of the textbooks so that I can electronically highlight, electronically make notes, and if I like to do it, you probably do too. So I think that those are two really, really key things, and very, very good to hear.
Thank you.
I'm very fortunate in that I get to go after such a solid foundation has been established. So I titled mine a little bit differently in terms of the perils and promises, but I get to that. I call mine mobile phone learning opportunities. I'll give you a slight overview. I'll hopefully offer you 3 promises, 2 perils, and 1 takeaway. Just a quick question: how many years do you think it took for cell phone users to get to 50 million users? You have the radio at 37 years. Getting a 5, can I have a 3? In actual fact, it was 3 years. So have a look at how quickly this has, grown into our society and our social cultural fibers. But talking about the question, we're talking about kids having cell phones, and why do kids have cell phones? Number one, safety, communication, and connectedness. And with that, I want to unpack a little bit of the 3 promises with regards to connectedness. You're giving these students an opportunity to contribute. You're giving them an opportunity to collaborate. And they love that. They love to collaborate on YouTube, love to collaborate on, voting for idols or anything else. So you could do that, incorporate that into your classroom in a similar technique. I do it. And so again, the connectedness is also this rapport and this bond that they have that's really, really powerful that we can tap into. But of course, we do have the policy of, bans in school and so on. But we have a great Secretary of Education that says yes to cell phones in school. What he basically says is that students do not lose their cell phones. They might lose the textbooks, they might lose the notebooks, but they do not lose their cell phones. And it's a point in point. They have it 24/7. So let's tap into that. Let's tap into that technology. Our mayor says that students come to school to learn, not to play games or send text messages. However, there is, arguments and research that shows that cell phones can teach students phonics, can teach them animation, and much more. Instead of just cheating. You cheat with pen and paper, but you don't ban pen and paper, right? So let's find creative ways of using the cell phone. Other ways and means, I'll go through this very quickly. Cell phone tours, recording their experience, collaborating with one another, what they found. Could be, dictating the experience, or even just videotaping or taking photos. They could do it for data collection and compare one another's science experiments, what were variables, what was different. You could even use it for special education. You could use it to stimulate multimodal senses. Maybe they can interact with a book and get a video, an audio, a little clip or something. And then, these handheld devices have been around for a while. Yes, we're talking about cell phones. This particular company, Wireless Generation, was just bought by Fox. But they've been around for more than a decade, and they've been using it for literacy assessment, using it with teachers, and actually saving teachers time and making the collected information and data available to students, parents, as well as superintendents, so that you can track a student's progress and also plot where the student's supposed to go in terms of their learning and literacy assessment. Of course, you could also use it for foreign language learning or ESL. So yes, lots of promises, solutions abound, lots and lots of promises, but we also have to look at, that this might be a perilous pursuit. Some people want to do the same mistake that we did when we spoke about e-learning. Take thousands of books and just put it onto a learning management system. Not the way to go. It's clunky, it's cumbersome, it's overwhelming. Also, we have the form factors that we have to deal with. I call this element interactivity, where you have a small keyboard, you have a small screen. Do you really expect a student to read, a big, huge chapter on this small screen? Do you really expect them to type an essay? But it could be used for great polling. It could be used for quick survey taking or MCQs. So definitely not this. You definitely do not want this kind of engagement. And 2 other perils. I did offer you 3 promises and 2 perils. Definitely distractive. The other panelists indicated that. Also disruptive. However, amidst all of that, you do have an opportunity to engage these students with this. And if you build this properly, I was supposed to move the slide, but if you build this properly and you inform it with proper theories, proper pedagogical practices, you can in actual fact tap into this technology, tap into this widespread ubiquitous use of cell phones. So yes, you have the social-emotional and cognitive aspects. You have them in the physical world, and you have them connecting via the virtual realm. And I think that we can bring that together with the cell phones, and in actual fact increase their connectedness, increase their opportunities to collaborate, increase their ability to conversate, bringing the mental world and the physical world together, and just stimulate and cultivate awareness as well as learning. That's my story. I teach a class on this at Teachers College, and it's a graduate course, and these are some of the aspects that we unpack in our course.
Okay, I guess I'm up now, right? All right. I have a slightly different kind of a... the thing that's been concerning me with cell phones in the classroom has been professors' attitudes toward the cell phones. This struck me when reading. I was reading Plato, right? Plato has a book called the Phaedrus, and it talks a lot about love and about the art of rhetoric and persuasive speaking. And it goes on a section. It is a kind of digression at one point where Socrates is talking to Phaedrus, and he talks about this. He's very concerned about books, and he thinks that books are a disruptive form of technology. You don't think about writing as being a form of technology because it's such an old piece of technology, but writing is the ability to write your thoughts down on paper is a piece of technology. And Plato thinks that books are a dangerous and bad part of technology. He says that books, the only reason for a book to exist, says Plato, is as an aid to memory. It's to remind you of things you already know. So you can take notes on things and you go back and review the notes to remind you of the knowledge that you already had but you maybe got a little bit hazy with. He says that only simple-minded and ignorant people would use a book for anything other than an aid to memory. He complains that books give people the illusion of learning, that you can't actually learn anything from a book, but if you read a book, you might think you've learned something when really you haven't, because for Plato, learning comes through dialogue and through discussion and through practice, and not these words in the page. He complains that books are mute when you ask them questions. If you are confused about what's going on in the book and you ask the book will not say anything to you. He says the books are dangerous, they're going to fall into the wrong hands, and that people who shouldn't have access to certain kinds of knowledge will just be able to have it. And that the book can't defend itself from any kinds of attacks on the book. It'll just sit there silently saying the same thing over and over again. And it's this striking, and he believes that books are going to erode the ability of people to educate. And it's this sort of shocking thing because this echoes exactly Socrates' arguments against books and for dialogue is the same arguments I heard growing up against television and for books, and the arguments that I'm hearing now against cell phones. And I think it's worth kind of thinking about disruptive technology in the classroom and our attitudes toward it, because when you realize that, it makes me feel kind of less aggressive about, because you start to, so you see the big picture, right? There's this kind of larger scope of technology being disruptive. So I'm going to go over a couple of things. One, this idea that students on cell phones aren't paying attention, right? That if they're on the cell phone and they're messing around during your class, they're not paying attention. I feel like for a lot of folks, not everybody, but a lot of folks, this is creating a kind of a nostalgia for the old days before cell phones, in which students paid 100% attention all the time, and politicians never lied, and cabbage only cost a nickel. And I'm not sure that that's right. I mean, I remember daydreaming and doodling and checking out mentally, and I'm not sure that the cell phones is causing the problem as much as it's another form of not paying attention, which has been around forever. I'm And I also find that in my own classroom, and everything I'm saying here is purely anecdotal, but in my own classroom, I feel that I see professors who treat the class like a job. And they say, well, so they'll, for example, a student falls asleep, they throw them out immediately. Student spells the professor's name wrong on the piece of paper, and they fail it. On the argument that if you spelled your boss's name wrong on something, you'd be fired, right? If you come in late, if a student comes in late to class, kick them out. Because if you came late to your job, you'd be fired. I'm not sure the classroom and the sort of job arena are exactly the same thing and should be treated the same. But it's my feeling that students learn better when we don't continually insist over and over again that they sort of sit up straight, lock their eyes on the professor, and genuflect. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't seem to be the best attitude towards learning. Because if stopping your class to yell at every student that comes in late is you're disrupting your own class right now with your sort of complaints about it. And just to give a kind of parallel example, I had a class taught that was 100 minutes long. I had a student, he fell asleep. He wasn't snoring, didn't disrupt anybody else, but he kind of conked out for about, 15, 20 minutes. Now, and at the end of class, he comes up to me and says, "Thank you, professor, for not kicking me out of class." And I thought about it, and I thought, the kid fell asleep. I don't know why he fell asleep. Maybe he fell asleep because he was partying the night before, and he was screwing around, and he was playing video games, and he's not paying attention. But maybe he fell asleep because he's back from Iraq and is having trouble, integrating back into civilian life. I don't know what's going on with this kid. What I do know is if he falls asleep, it's a 100-minute class, and he falls asleep for 25 minutes, he's got 75 minutes of learning. I kick him out of class, he's got 0 minutes of learning. I look at that picture and I say, I think I'd rather have the kid get the 75 minutes. And also, and get the 75 minutes than get the 0 minutes. I think when we complain about cell phones, students tune us out completely. The whole job is communicating with students. So if you talk to students in this kind of sort of cliche-ridden, back in the old days, I remember when all this was orange groves, and they immediately just check out when people say they believe me. Any complaints you have about cell phones, students have heard it before. And when you start on these complaints and attacking students for these kinds of things, they tune you out. Once they tune you out, you lost. How are you going to get through to them again? The last thing students want to hear about back in ye olden times, before all this disruptive technology messed everything up, they check out completely. Now, I don't know if it's so I don't. When students come in late, I don't yell at them when they're on the cell phones. I don't know. Maybe this is an important text message. I'm not gonna stop class to humiliate the student by having a conversation in front of them and checking on what they're doing and have this whole sudden, investigatory, as you were saying, because it disrupts my class, disrupts my ability to teach in the same way that yelling at every kid that comes in late disrupts my ability to teach. Now, I don't know if it's it's anecdotal, but I have a classroom. We started off with 30 kids in my Composition 2 classroom, and a week and a half ago, I looked at my sign-in sheet, I looked at the room, I had 30 students in that room, and we got a couple of weeks left in the semester. So I think that attitude, my relaxed attitude on these policies keeps kids coming back to class. I think the martinets that yell about the technology, the kids go, "I'm not coming." And I look around the building and you see these classes that have like 6, 7 students in them. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are there only 6 people in this room? I got 30 students in my room. And I think the students are, to get them to learn, they've got to show up. And you've got to give them the opportunity to listen. And if they're not disrupting other people, as you said, I feel like that's the best way to go. And I kind of want to end just by saying that in the year 1800, chalkboards were considered to be a disruptive piece of learning technology because teachers turned their backs on students, right? I think when you look at that long view of technology in the classroom, you start wondering if cell phones really are ushering in the apocalypse of done.
I'll say thank you very much for coming, and have a great day. Thank you so much.